Hello again. There is this discourse that comes around every few years. That discourse being, ooh, look at this new Pringles, Captain Morgan's whatever logo. Graphic designers are ruining all the beauty in the world. Now, as both a contrarian and a graphic designer, I feel the need to at least give some defence to why this may be happening, and why these new logos may actually be better in some ways. Not really though, like a lot of this stuff is tasteless corporate nonsense, in the aid of midwits pushing their little projects forward so that corporate gives them a cookie. Video essayists, stop going back in time in every video challenge. Anyway, in the Renaissance, there was this thing that was going on called humanism. Some might argue this is the fundamental nature of the Renaissance. Historians are divided on the topic. Basically, we're now henceforth going to concern ourselves with what is up with humans, human virtues, various philosophies of the past that pertain to humans, try to figure out what true beauty is and symmetry and all this stuff, rather than listening to the church and create 40 of the same sort of iconographic depiction of Jesus, lest we all be condemned. It's pretty much where all that neoclassical architecture that people love to simp about and romanticism and like paintings of the sea and such come from. A couple years ago, I went to the Byzantine Museum in Athens, and I know I'm going to get some hate for saying this, I hate Byzantine art. I am doing this to wind up the orthodox people online to some extent. Basically like the most on-the-nose art possible. There needs to be a lamb in there to represent Jesus, put a dove in there for the Holy Spirit, the same sort of iconographic depiction of the biblical scene, but instead of actually making it inspiring, we're just going to sort of depict the characters next to each other like we're 4 years old, painting with crayons. I get like you're trying to praise God, guys, but where's the dynamism? You know what I mean? I want to see some biblical scenes. Basically what I'm saying is Byzantine art is like your Catholic grandma murmuring under a breath at church, whereas the based humanist romantics are a sort of gospel choir hallucinating the Holy Spirit at church. To be clear, I obviously think this because I'm a romantic in this tradition, so I'm judging it by the standards that have been created after the fact. But I think this is the sort of fundamental idea in sort of modern art, let's say. It's Billie Eilish talking about her fifis and a guy painting himself and his descent into dementia. That's kind of what it is, right? So I think you probably agree to some extent, probably. Skip to the 19th and early 20th century, and the boys have been cooking, and we have a few different art movements going on. You know, you got your Art Deco, Art Nouveau, Baroque Revival, but importantly, there's this movement called modernism, which is various things that we don't need to get into here. But importantly, I don't care about rules. Rules are cringe. Let's start questioning stuff, make new styles, whatever. So rather than it being, I make big steeple on building because God, it's, how do we make this beautiful for humans? How do we make it useful for humans? And the reason to go through this short history, I'm not just doing it for view time, is just to emphasise in the latter part of this video that modernism and these art movements are a direct extension of the humanist ideas from the Renaissance. That's not to say that the previous styles were bad. Gothic architecture is by far one of my favourite architectural styles. I am so edgy and cool, of course. But importantly, the freedom to explore new styles is why these current art trends and design trends exist. Anyway, out of this, some mountain boys are just seething. Angry. Soy rage, someone might say. Also, there's this school called Bauhaus. No one really knows about them anyway. Who really cares? And these boys start expanding on this idea of human-centric design in trying to strip designs back to strictly what is necessary. So some principles you might have heard of if you're at all in the design world. Form follows function. Simple but useful shapes define the function of an object. So a rolling pin is cylindrical for pleasure, with a nice handle for ease of removal. Simplicity. Don't waste your time adding unnecessary elements, just create the thing as it is and strip back all the faff. And importantly, then this is one of the big ones to remember, technology, so the ability to replicate the designs in material. So we're going to use raw concrete because it's quite easy to mass produce and painting's annoying. In short, stop faffing around with ornamentation because it's a pain to mass produce and likely hurts functionality, at least functionality as we've defined it, so just strip it back to what is strictly necessary for usage and the design is objectively better. Put on top of this the mountain men and their love for sans serif typography, and you might start to see why the corpos love a bit of flat design. Is it Apple's fault? Maybe. In the final rebellion against God and all that is holy, Apple decided to make their logo the forbidden fruit of good and evil. Except they didn't, it's a reference to Newton, and I know that because this is their original logo. And if we were in current year, all over Twitter, we'd have the people, oh my god, the graphic designers, they're ruining beauty again. But you would be saying this about one of the most valuable and recognisable pieces of iconography ever created, and I'll just say it, the new logo is better. Apple truly are the kings of pushing minimalism in the technology world, often striking this nice balance between cold objectivity and functionality and pleasantness to use. I say this as someone without an iPhone distinctly, so I clearly don't like it that much, but it's probably why they're one of the big time influences on the design world. You might be wondering why I say the Apple logo now is better than the old school Newton one, despite being quite pretty. Just do a side by side. Can you tell what this is? That right there sort of encapsulates the main reason these logo changes exist. Form follows function, as we said before. So your logo needs to be simple because it's going to be used in 4 million places, including on a tiny screen. Just imagine those hands of the Foxconn worker trying to etch that bollocks onto the back of your iPhone. I kind of rest my case a bit. Minimalism is good actually. It massively aids readability for people who are hard of sight and for like dyslexic people and such. And it also makes interfaces easier to use and speeds up the usage of those things for any given software. Do you know when Apple did destroy the UI? It was when they recently did a bit of a throwback to Frutiger Aero that you were all simping about a few months ago with their new liquid thing, and thus made it impossible to tell the differences between all of the icons of their user interface. Just because it is maximalist, as much as I love myself some maximalism, does not make it good. Obviously, Frutiger itself was very much in the modernist school of design, but you get my point. And this is why I wanted to make this video. There is a distinct difference between beauty in the old school Apple logo and design in the new Apple logo that, I say new, it's been used for 40 odd years. There is a difference between art and design to an extent, and I know the Bauhaus boy is going to hate me for it. Making a chair as a craftsman versus making an artisanal chair for display is very different, and painting for a painting versus painting for a poster are also very different. They serve very different functions. Or one of the purposes of art, which is to induce awe, stupefy, etc., does not require absolute legibility, whereas an escape sign for a building, or the number buttons on your phone so you can ring 999 when you've had a whitey and think you're going to die, that does require legibility. And I will just say as well, it's entirely possible that what's happened with the Cracker Barrel scenario is that they're probably like releasing an app or something, and they want a nice little icon for their little app. So you get a nice little logo that works well on a little screen so that the little middle managers can push their little projects in your bloody face. I'm just waiting for the Cracker Barrel plus whatever loyalty scheme, Trinket Go, whatever they're going to call it. We'll never pay on a debit card again. I don't want an app. There is, however, a level of minimalism in which things start to lose function. So this obsession that modern designers have with this sort of flat design thing, more realistically, the corpos that are asking them to do it, actually often makes things less legible. The midwits cannot be trusted with anything. Give them an idea and they'll run it right into the ground. You know, maybe getting rid of every drop shadow and gradient does not, in fact, make your interface easier to use. Section 3. Beauty as function. That's a very nice academic title, I feel. You know what I mean? I'm like fully essaying, man. The phrase being so smart you're stupid comes to mind when looking at these new modern logo redesigns. And I think a good rule of thumb for when you're applying midwittery is something like, have you defined the parameters so narrowly when conceivably there are other parameters in which you are ignoring? This, I argue, is what Bauhaus and the modern sort of simplistic design philosophy encourages. If you think back to some of the principles before, namely simplicity, strip designs back to their basal form, strip your designs back to what is strictly necessary for function, with the results of what they're advocating for, it ends up being literally what the function of that object is. So the function of a chair is to sit on, the function of a pen is to write. So we'll just make it right, basically. And there is very clearly, as the general public identify, a function that is missing out of all this, and that is beauty. The simple joy of using an object, the aesthetic joy of using a thing, is itself a function. As much as the corporate sphere would like us to think that we're all just little machines who are making rational decisions, we actually want a bit of a mess about. You know, millennials were out here buying bloody quills. You know what I mean? I can't think of anything less functional. Mate, you're so stupid. Why are you even playing football? I can just pick the ball up and throw it into the net. What are you doing? There's a great clip of a marketeer called Rory Sutherland talking about this, about doormen at hotels.
You define the value of the doorman as someone opening the door, okay? And you bring in McKinsey or something and they go, well, you pay your doorman X thousand of dollars a year. We've defined his role as opening the door. We'll replace him with an automatic door opener. With an infrared device where the door slides open when people walk up. And then 6 months later, basically your rack rate's fallen off a cliff and their vagrants asleep in your hotel entrance because the doorman wasn't just about opening the door. So a doorman is part security, part recognition, part status, part taxi hailing, part good to see you again, Mr. J. All that stuff, okay?
The entire point of humanism, to begin with, was to make it so that things were human-centric, so that it was easier for humans to use them, and more fit for human consumption, more fit for human purpose. When you get so locked in on this idea of simplicity to aid functionality, you actually end up hurting the functionality of the thing itself, not least of which in the beauty of using it, but also the function of branding itself. Understandably, as we need to bear in mind here, these companies aren't making decisions between what is beautiful. Like, you could have conceivably a more beautiful thing that would function less good for selling things. But for the corpos in the audience, you might argue that making every single brand look the same is ignoring the fundamental function of branding, which is to distinguish yourself and have an identity from other brands and to signal what the kind of thing you are is. But also, giving people an aesthetically pleasing experience is itself a form of marketing. Like, if you think back to all the commodity fetishism that goes around old Mackies with the playgrounds and stuff, or the Build-A-Bear workshop thing, or in this case with you, Cracker Barrel, where you've hurt your reputation by making your logo less characterful. By allowing the midwits to push a single aspect of design as important, that being it looks professional, or it keeps in line with current design trends, or whatever it might be, you're actually ignoring a qualitative difference between branding that actually makes a difference to your bottom line, except you probably wouldn't see it immediately because, like with all marketing, it's often a bit ephemeral and not obvious why it's even useful. As Rory likes to point out, the sort of thing that quantitatively would get missed by the finance department in one of these major corporations. I would argue that to be good at a lot of things or to learn a lot of skills, you need to be looking at fundamentally, why are we doing the thing that we're doing? First principles thinking, as it's often referred to, facts and logic. This is a skill as an antisocial aspie, which I am sort of naturally a savant at, if I do say so myself, but I find is sorely lacking in many members of the public, and especially amongst middle managers of marketing departments in these corporations, who love to watch Captain Morgan burn. There's some marketing agency getting paid $250k as one Blue Sky. I mean, tweet was like a thing, but anyway, I saw it on Blue Sky. I've got a Blue Sky account now, so if you want the extended edition, follow me on there. Link in bio. That's a good example of good branding. A bit of a tangent here. Elon with the X thing, vile. That's not even a politically motivated thing. You've literally just ruined an entire ecosystem of design language there for the sake of the letter X. Alright, bro. Anyway, as mentioned in the previous section, the primary problem here is that the midwits in these marketing agencies aren't actually analysing the fundamental nature of why they're even doing the branding, or if they are, they're ignoring it just to give the corpos what they want, which is keeping up to date with modern design trends or whatever it might be, making everything look sleek and minimalist. The point of branding fundamentally is to have a unique, identifiable icon or a structure of like what things look like in your organisation so that customers know exactly what they're getting. So, big M in the case of McDonald's, the little mermaid for Starbucks, the Apple logo and their entire like minimalist thing. It's where you can create comfortability with what's going to happen. So like, if you go into a Mackey's, you know sort of socially what the process of ordering is, much like you would in a restaurant. That's a kind of branding. It's you giving context for how people should behave in this environment and how people should act towards your product. But it's not just that, it's also to signal what kind of thing you are. So for example, commodity fetishism isn't just accidental, it's actually a conscious decision. It's a company signalling, we are the same vibe as you, whatever it might be. You're this kind of person if you come here, so if you're a metalhead, Ollie Sykes will say, shop at Drop Dead. But look, we're doing all this gothic thing and it's like, this is an identity thing. So all of their branding fits around that. Like, if you're into yoga and goop, the branding for a sort of artisanal, grass-fed, small batch, freshly roasted, whatever, coffee shop is aimed at you as opposed to sort of the big corporate Starbucks or Costa Coffee or whatever it might be. It's saying, if you want that corporate nonsense, go to those degenerates at Starbucks, as if you would do that. Look, we're saying it's like organic or whatever it might be. It's not just because of the quality of the product, it's because you're signalling we're not like those other nasties or whatever it is. You're positioning yourself in people's identity. Of course, I'm like massively ignoring here the sort of quality of the products themselves, but I think learning about marketing itself just sort of teaches you how much more the positioning and marketing of a product matters versus the actual quality of the product, which is not the world I wish to live in, but I think it's the world we do. You know, Apple using their sleek minimalism is a very intentional choice. It's from everything. It's like, as you open the box and like you move it out of the box, and it's just this very nice sort of, oh, isn't that satisfying? It's like very precise, you know, it's like, oh, look at this. Look at how like precise and like minimalist we are. And then you open up the apps and all the operating systems also minimal and, you know, it's very sleek and stuff. It's signaling, look, this is a very luxury, well thought out product. You know, we're going to put like a string quartet over it or whatever it might be and some pictures of dancers, or you know what I mean? Just think how perfect the experience of this product is going to be if this is how nicely and tastefully we're doing all of our branding. And this, I think, beauty aside, is why the reactions to these logo redesigns happen. As a famous Instagram comment says to the Petco redesign, you aren't a trendy New York upstart, you are a pet store, change your logo back or I will burn your stores down. Understanding your vibe is exactly why these redesigns are very stupid. Like, minimalism is fine and often necessary, and you should consider it when designing your stuff, but was it necessary to turn Captain Morgan from an antique-looking drawing as if you found the bottle on a desert island to sort of a big tech girl boss? Is it better when, let's say, you're running a Savile Row tailor to have like a very minimalistic whatever where we can scale it down from a distance and we can use it on 14 different sizes? Or is it better to use sort of antique looking crests and serif fonts that are a bit sort of hard to read when scaled down, even if it might not be as legible across a footy field or on a tiny phone app, because you're signalling we are a luxury brand. This is for established British gentlemen do not know. Only for the finest and most refined of tastes. If you wanted to do the minimalism, you could even do a sort of Art Deco throwback, like a Savoy type thing, roaring 20s it up. But do you know what you wouldn't do? You wouldn't use bloody Helvetica, would you? So minimalism isn't inherently bad. You just need to know where you're at. Apple do this brilliantly because it fits well with their general ecosystem and it's been their design philosophy and branding for the last 40 odd years. But in the case of Cracker Barrel, was it worth sacrificing your sort of, we're a rootin' tootin' cowboy man and this is a little truck stop on Armadillo, yeehaw? Was abandoning that vibe useful when it comes to your branding? Just so you can make your logo smaller on a roundabout 400 yards away does not mean you should abandon these important elements of brand positioning. To finish the video, I'll leave you with another little Rory Sutherland gem, because I think his mind is really good when attacking this sort of ridiculousness that now goes on in the corporate sphere. But I hope you enjoyed the video.
And when you check in, they say, and welcome you to our Doubletree. Here are warm Doubletree cookies. Now, the finance people hate that because they go, no one in our market research has said they want warm cookies when they check in. Why are we giving someone something that they didn't ask for? It's a cost, therefore we need to cut it. Foil on the top of the
San
Pellegrino thing. Someone described it beautifully, one of my colleagues, as an access all areas pass for the drink. In other words, you could have a wedding and have cans of San Pellegrino because it had the foil dressing, okay? Whereas it would be a bit weird to have Tango, okay, right, at your wedding. It basically said this is a posh drink.